We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello and welcome to the Sports History Network Showcase, our in-house show featuring SHN podcasters talking sports, talking history, and talking sports history. My name is Oz Davis, host of the Sports History Network's Truly the Goats podcast. In this episode, my guest is Joe Ziemba. He's the author of Legends, the football history of Morgan Park Military Academy, and When Football Was Football, the Chicago Cardinals, and the birth of the NFL. He's also a host of the podcast named after that second book, the When Football Was Football podcast here at the Sports History Network. Joe, how's it going for you this morning?
Everything's going well, Oz. I'm in the Chicago area, and so it's a nice sunny spring day, and the Bears did not lose yesterday, so I'm in a good mood. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, the kicker didn't even bounce it off the uprights twice. Does that still hurt?
It does. There's been some kind of emergency fire sale on dented goalposts that I think people around the world are still buying up.
Nice. Yeah, eBay had a nice run there, right? Okay, well, I usually ask my guests, first off, to talk a little bit about their history with their personal fandom, but it's right there on the website. It says on the website that you first came interested in the history of pro football after discovering that your father was a draft choice of the Chicago Cardinals in the 1940s. I guess my first question is, why discover? What, was this just not discussed, or what's the story there?
That is actually an excellent question, comment, and observation all in one. He didn't talk about it. He was this big guy, a great football coach, and unless you really asked him about it, and even then he wouldn't say much, we didn't know about his football background as kids growing up. Certainly we had a lot of people with, say, big names in football that he seemed to know, and I didn't care a bit about football growing up. And but he never talked about it. But it's one of those things in a family where when you move, and my dad passed away many years ago, but there was a box of his stuff. You know, we've always got that favorite box of stuff. And in his box, which he was actually at my grandmother's house, had these letters from people like George Hellis and Jimmy Councilman, people I didn't really know about. Of course, I knew growing up being a Bears fan what the name was. And the draft was around already, so he did get drafted by the Cardinals. But coaches would still send letters because they were trying to push the guy not only to play football for them, but also to offer them job opportunities in the area. So way back then, believe it or not, these guys all had to have full-time jobs even during the football season to make ends meet. And that was kind of the fun story about my dad. Not only did he not talk about it, but when I found his original contract, it was for $110 a game. If he got hurt, he didn't get paid, and he had to provide his own shoes and shoulder pads. So that was pro football back in the 40s. And he got hurt in training camp, decided he could make more money coaching high school football than he could playing pro football. And so that's what he made his career. But I always enjoy telling that story because he never told me. So I'm getting back at him right now.
Karmic retaliation. I love it.
Exactly, yes.
Was he coaching at Morgan Park?
Yes, he was, actually. He coached at this place called Morgan Park Military Academy, which dropped football over 40 years ago, but still is in the top rankings of Illinois high schools in terms of victory. So he had some really good teams, and it was a different type of genre for football. He had these guys 24/7, literally. They had a preseason training camp where they took them up to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin to get them in shape. And, of course, during the year, they'd play other sports. He was also the track coach and athletic director. And so he was able to keep the guys up to speed, of course, with football. And had a lot that went on to college. And when I was doing research for my book, and it was one of those things you say, yeah, someday I'm going to write about this and write about Morgan Park Academy football, which people today, even though the academy is still there as a regular academy, Morgan Park Academy, and doing very well, people don't know its great athletic history. So I just wanted to bring that up to the front. And they had 4 college football Hall of Famers that were affiliated with the school. One was Amos Alonzo Stagg, who was one of the original coaches. They had Wallace Wade from Alabama and Duke. The stadium is named after him. Jess Harper from Notre Dame, and a guy named Benbrook, who was one of the first, I think, 2-time All-American linemen from the University of Michigan. So they are all from Morgan Park Military Academy way back when.
Nice. You wrote these 2 books based on your dad's teams, more or less. Did you ever consider collecting all of the letters and stuff into a book?
I had thought about that, and he'd probably say, no, you're a knucklehead. Stay away from that. Don't talk about me. But it's nice to have. It's nice to have, and I do talk about football, and I always bring up that story I just shared about my dad and his unique contract.
Nice.
People who think football's glamorous, you're all going to be a millionaire for life, which a lot of these guys are, of course, but things were so much different. That's, I guess, how I kind of got the title of the book, When Football Was Football. And I was driving in Chicago and got the idea. But it's really, when you hear that, you want to take people back to a different time and a different place to where these guys played for the love of the game. Not that they don't today, but they were in it to play it. They also had another job, and, of course, medical insurance was nil. They took big risks, but I always enjoyed those early days and finding as many stories as I can to share.
The more sports history that you do, especially if you're talking about North American sports history, the more you realize that this whole players are rich members of society is really new. I mean, yeah. You wonder why the 1919 Chicago White Sox threw the World Series. They weren't making any money.
That's true. Yep.
They hated their boss. And so because he wasn't paying them, you read about the Jim Thorpes of the world, where it was just like, do I feel like playing football or not? Because he's making scratch. It's a common theme.
Exactly.
We'll get back to the conversation with Joe Ziemba of the When Football Was Football podcast. But first, I wanted to give a plug for a new advertiser here at Sports History Network and on the SHN Showcase, newspapers.com. If you're listening to this podcast or any of the Sports History Network, you're probably into sports history. Then you'll probably know what I mean when I say that. For learning about anything prior to, say, 1990, certain search engines are completely useless. Go ahead. Do a search for Babe Didrikson or Jack Nolan. You get the same old Wikipedia entries, eBay and Amazon advertisements, and cliche-filled YouTube videos. But check out newspapers.com. Newspapers.com gives you access to over 640 million pages worth of news from the U.S., Canada, England, Scotland, Ireland, and more, dating back from 1798 to yesterday. Get the real-time You Are There reportage of the first Super Bowl in 1967, the trial of the Black Sox in 1920, the Berlin Olympics of 1936. Just imagine a time, an event, and newspapers.com takes you there with historical flavor and honest representation that search engines just don't have. And right now, get a free 1-week subscription to newspapers.com by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/ newspapers. With a paid subscription, you'll also be helping to support the production of this podcast and other Sports History Network shows. That's sportshistorynetwork.com/newspapers. Newspapers.com. Way better than the usual search engine. Like, you know what I'm talking about.
Not many players can claim to be a member of their team's worst all-time season as well as its best, and have a great time doing both. Tackle Chet Bulger of the Chicago Cardinals enjoyed an intriguing 9-year career in the NFL, being with the Cardinals from 1942 through 1949.
Your podcast is unique in that it's focused on the histories of two teams.
Yeah.
The Chicago Bears and the Chicago/St. Louis/Arizona Cardinals. In fact, I think they were the Phoenix Cardinals for a little while too.
They were, yeah.
Tell us a little more about when football was football.
I have this great opportunity to share some of these stories. And in fact, I was talking to one of our colleagues on the Sports History Network, Darren Hayes, the other day about how I'm just in awe of the way sports research is taking off with all the tools we have now, that we can look things up and find things out that weren't known before. And for those who are interested, this is very valuable information. So with my podcast, it was originally thought I'd share some of the stories just about the Cardinals, but it also seems that there's a lot about the Bears, and these are the two oldest teams in the National Football League, the two that were there at the start in 1920 when the league was initiated, but also they were both around before then. And in my research for the book, When Football Was Football, and for talks I've given since then, there's a great deal of information that's erroneous. In fact, the next book that I'm wrapping up talks about the early history of both the Bears and the Cardinals. And I was a bit flabbergasted, to use an archaic word, about how much history of both teams is inaccurate. So we're going to bring that to the forefront. And then moving ahead now to the podcast, is what we try and do is go beyond Google and to really go into microfilm, going beyond the online resources and find stories that might be of interest. And I always look at it as I always want to learn. Whatever I can learn each day is going to be helpful. And so I'm looking for topics that interest me and hopefully will interest others. That's why we have some strange things like the first football games played in Chicago, which go way back to the 19th century, and finding some different personality traits about people. The current podcast talks about Red Grange running into Al Capone's gangsters over a prize fight, which I had never learned before. So that's what we're trying to do, is really dig into the archives, take a deep dive, and find some stories that haven't been done before. And most of the articles are going to be original. Most of the podcasts, I should say, are going to be original research for that particular episode. And so that's what we're trying to do. Go way, way back with football, but keep it in the Chicago area. We might do some high school. We have done some high school. I did an episode on Morgan Park Military Academy's football team, and who knows, maybe some colleges. But I think the focus is not to get too broad, but to keep it in the Chicago area in the professional ranks. That's, at least for now, that's our immediate future. And I'm enjoying the heck out of it, enjoying the comments that we get back from people and the suggestions for new talks that we might be able to do.
Yeah, I believe the Arizona Cardinals are the second oldest sports club in North America, right? The Toronto Argonauts, I believe, are older.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, definitely, though, for America, they are.
Yeah, the Cardinals are 1898. Is that correct?
1899, and that's one of the things that I found out in my research, because if you go to the Cardinals media guide or even the Pro Football Hall of Fame, it'll say 1898, but it was 1899, and that's kind of the fun of it, because I always tell people I really have no life, that I really get excited about finding something that no one else has. And so I found out, no, Cardinals didn't exist in 1898. They started in 1899 as the Morgan Athletic Association, which is just a bunch of teenagers playing football. But we can link that original team back to Chris O'Brien, who then sold the team to Dr. David Jones, who sold the team to the Bidwell family in the 30s. So really only 3 owners and that, throughout that long history of now over 120 years.
Okay, a couple of simple ones for you, but some of the listeners may not know this. All right, who are the Decatur Staleys?
Decatur Staleys began in 1919 with the A.E. Staley Company, and it was a football team that the owner of the company decided to start some sports teams. So baseball was his primary interest, and then he started a football team, a basketball team. He had track events. But it was in early 1920 that he contacted George Hallis, and Hallis was not his first choice, by the way, to a recent graduate of the University of Illinois to come down and help organize another version of the football team that had been around since 1919, and to make it more of a national, I guess, I'm not going to say powerhouse, but being more competitive, at least in the Midwest. And so the Staleys are the forerunners of the Chicago Bears. That team was in Decatur for 1920, but Hallis started moving games to Chicago to draw bigger crowds. The Staley Field didn't hold very many people, and all the employees got a substantial discount to attend the game. So Hallis, being the visionary that he was, figured that drawing 10,000 to Cubs Park, which was Wrigley Field later years, would be better than drawing 1,500 down at Staley Field in Decatur. So that's where it was from. And Hallis also played baseball. He was their leading hitter. But the Decatur Staleys, again, were the originators of the Chicago Bears as we know them today. They took the name Chicago Staleys for 1 year as a part of the separation agreement with Mr. Staley that Hallis and his new partner, Dutch Sterneman, signed with Mr. Staley back in 1920-21.
I guess I'm glad they didn't call them the Sternumums.
Yes, right.
That would have been difficult to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
What about the Racine Cardinals? Did the Cardinals actually play in Wisconsin?
There was a misnomer about the Racine Cardinals. In fact, in the original minutes for the 1920 initial meeting of the National Football League, which had a different name at the time, it was listed that one of the participants would be the Racine, Wisconsin Cardinals. But one of the names of the early, today's Arizona Cardinals, was the Racine Cardinals. And what happened way back when in Chicago was a lot of the teams took the street name that the players might have lived on to be the name of their team. And so we had teams called the Westerns and the Hamlins, etc., and the Halsteads, which are all streets on the south side of Chicago. Chris O'Brien, as I mentioned, who was one of the originators of the team with his brother Pat, lived on Racine Avenue. And so that's where they took the name Racine. So it's not Wisconsin, but it's just a street in Chicago. And the Cardinals name did not come from, we are also told in history that it came either from the name of a bird or that Chris O'Brien bought jerseys that looked like Cardinal leather.
Mm-hmm.
And
right, that's what I thought.
Yeah, but it's actually, they became for a year or two the the Cardinals Athletic and Social Club, just a name, because the clubs at the time took different names from their street or something that appealed to them. So again, another story that's not completely accurate, but I always like to tell that because it's kind of fun that Chris O'Brien didn't even own the team, so he didn't buy any jerseys for it. It was a club where all the members contributed equally.
Interesting. Okay, I'll be right back with Joe Ziemba of When Football Was Football, right after a message in which football history fans will be quite interested.
The 2021 Professional Football Researchers Association Convention will be held at the Gold Jacket Lounge at the Pro Football Hall of Fame during the final weekend of June. Convention speakers will celebrate the 100th anniversary of the founding of the NFL. The fee for the convention is $50 for members and $100 for non-members. The fee includes admission to the convention and Pro Football Hall of Fame, meals on Friday evening and Saturday afternoon, and free parking. All convention activities are subject to COVID-19 protocols. For more details, click on the 2021 PFRA convention link at profootballresearchers.org.
Okay, I am with Joe Ziemba. The name of his podcast is When Football Was Football. But, Joe, now I'd like to talk to you about what we just heard about the Pro Football Researchers Association convention in June. You're playing a role in that. Tell us about your participation in the convention.
Yeah, so I've been a member of what we call the PFRA for many, many years. Great organization for knuckleheads like myself who, I shouldn't say that. That was a blanket assertion. I apologize. People like myself who love old-time football, love researching it. And so we have this conference every 2 years. It wasn't held last year because of the pandemic. But when the conference is held, it's got great speakers, a lot of interesting topics, people like us that have specific topics they like to research and present their information on. And also there's usually a few ex-players there or maybe some NFL administrators and other people who have an interest in that type of old football research. But yeah, I've been asked to participate as part of a panel discussion that will discuss the early days of the NFL. So we'll be talking about the Muncie Flyers and the Decatur Staleys and the Racine Cardinals, teams that were there in the beginning with the panel of other folks. So I'm really looking forward to it. And besides the presentations, it's nice to see and meet and discuss football with other folks with similar interests. There's some really, really cool side events. For example, a tour of the archives at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There's going to be a luncheon at a restaurant/tavern, which some of the founders of the league apparently were at many years ago, with a presentation by John Kendall, the archivist at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, who everyone should meet in their lifetime because of his superb knowledge. And so I'm really looking forward to not only my small part in it, but hearing what others have to say. And I wish this is one of those conferences which you could have every month instead of every couple of years. But since we missed a year, I'm certainly looking forward to being in Canton in June.
Mm-hmm. Is it always in Canton?
No, it's different locations. The last one was in Buffalo, where we had Thurman Thomas came, which was really neat.
Nice.
And a lot of former Buffalo players. There was a tour of the Buffalo Stadium, and a couple of years before that, it was in Green Bay. So we actually met at Lambeau Stadium. And I was able to tell everybody there about this Lambeau. It's the only stadium named after a Cardinals coach. And everyone looked at me kind of crazy, forgetting that Curly Lambeau coached the Cardinals for a year and a half in the 50s. So.
You guys have a trivia bout there, it sounds like. Let's see. Got just a general kind of question. We talked before the show about how you're much more into, say, football of the 1920s rather than the 2020s. But just in general, how do you feel about the modern NFL game?
I do enjoy the game. And I have passion for it. And by that, I mean that when I say watch the Bears play or the Cardinals with my dual allegiances there, I'm not fit to be in a room with another human being. And that kind of passion doesn't come out of me in any other kind of situation. So maybe there's some kind of emotional subject that I'm falling into right there. But I enjoy the game. Some of the measures that have been taken to make certain the players are safer, I applaud. Probably more can be done. I always worry about that. We see such catastrophic injuries now because the players are so much bigger. And I think back to when 100 years ago we had the big star of the league was Teddy Driscoll of the Cardinals, who was maybe 5'7" and 160 pounds, but he was running behind a guard named Clyde Zoya, who was 175 pounds and a starter for years in the NFL at that size. So as we all know, the players have gotten bigger. It's a year-round commitment for the players, of course, and they're paid to be a year-round commitment. But I do enjoy the game. I enjoy the passing game, the excitement that it brings. And where 100 years ago, it was not uncommon to have almost every game be a shutout for one of the two teams. Now we're disappointed if the numbers, the scoring numbers aren't up in the atmosphere in the 30s and the 40s. So it's an enjoyable game, and I certainly am a big fan. And, of course, looking forward to the draft as everyone else is later in April of this year.
In my day job, I'm kind of obsessed with the draft right now. I mean, really, it's the only thing happening in football, so that's what I'm writing about. Now, you told me before the show that you're not too in depth about it, but you've got the Cardinals at number 16, you've got the Bears at number 20. What do you hope they do? And what are your expectations for this upcoming season? I mean, especially the Cardinals in the NFC West, they're looking at an uphill road, I think.
Yeah, the Cardinals, however, have done a great job of adding some key players in the offseason.
Yes,
where the Bears, we have a new quarterback. I think a lot of fans were hoping to make the plunge and hit the jackpot with a Russell Wilson, so to speak. At one time, Deshaun Watson. But Andy Dalton is a proven winner, which will be nice. And he's been around and got the experience. Maybe I shouldn't say winner in terms of winning numerous Super Bowls, but being a winner in terms of being able to lead the team. So I think a lot of people in Chicago are still looking maybe if the Bears don't trade up to grab another quarterback for the future, which would make sense. And the Cardinals are loaded up at receiver. They seem to be set at quarterback. Do they need more work on defense? Every team has lots of holes to plug. And we're wondering, I'm personally, I think maybe the Cardinals could use some help on defense at this time.
Well, I'm glad you didn't say that the Bears should trade up to number 3 and draft a Trubisky type. That would have been very disappointing, Joe. All right, Joe Ziemba of the When Football is Football podcast. Thanks very much for joining us here on the showcase.
Great, Oz. And this is really a wonderful thing you're doing of expressing and sharing the opinions and the subject matter that the different folks on the Sports History Network are following on their, some are daily, some are not weekly, but thank you again for this opportunity. I always enjoy sharing whatever I can about those golden days of pro football.
Thanks. Just trying to show my appreciation for the sports history geeks. And that is not a mischaracterization.
That's great. Well, I kind of call myself a research nerd. It fits perfectly there. It does.
This has been the Sports History Network Showcase podcast. We'd like to thank our guest, Joe Ziemba, author of the book and host of the podcast, When Football Was Football, which is available through sportshistorynetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts. The theme song for the SHN Showcase is Quartz by Ani Tech, and it is available through fair use agreement via freemusicarchive.org. SHN Showcase will be back soon with another Sports History Network podcast. Until then, this is Oz Davis saying stay safe and stay historical.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings you sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row One catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row One Pictorum Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.